Hello and welcome back to GoodKnit Kisses. Today we've got a special loom along. We're going to be doing the Spring Vine Infinity Scarf by Kristen at GoodKnit Kisses, which is featured in the Loom Knitters magazine in the Spring 2012 issue. You can get that issue online, and if it's not a current issue when you're watching this video, you can go to loomknittercircle.com and get that pattern from the archive document. Let's get started. Today we are doing this on the Martha Stewart loom. Now you can do this on any loom that you can make in a full circuit in the round, or you'll end up having to connect the panels together. I am using the Martha Stewart loom. We are using 2 half circles, the 28 hole, and then the 2 36 holes, straight pieces, and then we've got 4 of the 12 hole pieces. We are using every other hole in the pink pegs, and then grab a contrasting color or the green peg for your starting peg, or just use a stitch marker. You can also use an infinity type loom, but this is going to be 88 pegs total in the round in a complete circuit. The sample that was knitted that's featured in the magazine is in Bernat Baby Boucle and Lion Brand Homespun yarn. Now those are 2 strands held as one. Today we're just going to be using 1 strand, and I'm using Yarn Bee Finale color called Curtain Call. It's a nice kind of thick and thin combination. It's a combination wool and acrylic. This is a bulky number 5. There are 65 yards in a skein, and I'm using 2 today. Let's get started. Alright, we're going to start with the slip knot, and this is going to be a crochet cast on. You'll need a crochet hook. This is a size I, and whatever's comfortable for the yarn that you're working with. Again, you can do this 2 strands held as one. This one I'm doing 1 strand. It's going to be a lacier effect. I'm going to start with the slip knot. And if you've seen my crochet cast on before, you can do them a couple of different ways. Today I'm going to not start with the slip knot on the peg, but actually start with it on my hook, and it's going to be a little bit different. We're going to put the working strand behind the peg, and we're going to wrap it around and pull it through your slip knot. This first one is a little bit harder to get started, and once you have that on there, then you can keep going. You want to work your way to the left or the right, whichever way is more comfortable for you. I like to go to the left. It's more comfortable for me. I'm right-handed. So I'm going to grab my working strand between those 2 pegs, and we're going to pull it through. And then we're going to keep going all the way around the loom. Now some areas are thicker than others because, as you see, this yarn has a thick and thin consistency. If this is moved in your screen, it's because this loom is so large, I'm having to work around the camera, so I may move the loom around a little more than you see me. So go ahead and go to the back side of all these pegs and work your way around. If you're not comfortable with the crochet cast on, go ahead and do an Ewrap cast on. That's perfectly fine. I like the edge of the crochet personally, but you can do whatever cast on gets you 88 pegs. Oops. And now you see I need to pay more attention. This particular yarn, there you go. It has it's harder to grab onto, and your hook can catch it, so you kind of have to watch it. But you want to just cast on whatever way's best and do 88 pegs all the way around to where they're connected into a circle. And we will meet back up at the end and go to the next step. Okay, I've come to the end of my crochet cast on, and I did not verbalize it earlier, but just to make sure that you know, I'm working from the inside of the loom when I do this. It's just easier to approach it for me. And so you should have 2 loops on the inside of your loom, and then you'll have 1 on the outside. So this is successfully casted on. If you had done an Ewrap configuration, you end up having 2 loops on the inside and 1 on the outside as normal. Now when you get to the end here, this is my 88th peg. What I want to do is take my extra loop after I've looped around that one, take that loop and put that on my starter peg. Okay, so I've got that on my starter peg, and now I want to lift the bottom loop over the top and knit over. And I'm going to turn this loom around so you can see that. Okay, I'm on the front side here, and I've got this crochet cast on top, and now I'm going to pull this up and over to cast this on. Be sure and grab the whole of the strand if you're using the thick, thin kind of yarn that I am, very homespun. Then make sure and grab everything. So now I've got one loop on each peg. It's now connected in the round, and we can now continue on. Our first row is going to be Ewrap. So what you want to do is wrap every peg around, so it crosses in the back as an Ewrap. We're going to go all the way around and knit over, and then we will meet back up for the next row. So pause your video and we'll meet up. All right, well, you've done row 1. Now, I wanted to do a couple of tips before we move on. You'll notice I put this on a table, and by now you've discovered how large this is if you haven't started knitting yet. And I recommend actually doing the crochet cast on a table. It's just a lot easier to manage. This is a very large loom, and I want to point out that what I do in between takes is I'm actually taking this and putting it on my lap after I've wrapped on the table, and I'm putting it on its end to make it easier for me on my lap. And then I'll actually make it long ways in between my legs to knit over on the two ends. So that's what you're not seeing off camera, and I wanted you to know how I'm doing it to manage it better, because this is a very long loom. It's not an S-type loom. So let's move on to row 2. We are going to purl this row, and you're going to take your working yarn and put it down below your peg, and you want to grab that working yarn, pull it up, get your new loop, take off the old, and put on the new, and pull that taut a little tight there. It doesn't have to be extremely tight, just make it snug. And you're going to do this, continue with the purl stitch every peg all the way around for row 2. And what this does is it gives it a garter ridge all the way around the loom. And then we're going to have some sets of stitches. So go all the way around, do the completion of the purl row, and we will meet back up for the main pattern. Now we're going to begin our drop stitch section of the pattern. This section is going to be 4 rows, and the main part to get the drop stitch is going to be the first 2 rows, and then the next 2 rows just ease it in and set it up for the next set of the pattern. So the part you want to pay most attention to is row 3 and 4. We are going to E-wrap and yarn over. Now when we E-wrap, normally we would wrap the whole loom and then knit over. The key to this is not continuing on with all your wraps, because we want to E-wrap and yarn over on the same peg. So we're going to E-wrap this first peg, just like that, push it all the way down. We're going to need some room. We're going to yarn over 3 times. 1, 2, 3. We're going to move on. The secret is to E-wrap this first peg. If we don't, all we're going to get is a big mess. So E-wrap that one over. What that does is it locks on these yarn overs, and if we didn't do that, this whole thing would come unraveled, and we'd have a whole lot of yardage doing nothing. So now that we've E-wrapped that, we're going to yarn over 3 times. 1, 2, and 3. Okay, let's move on. E-wrap, knit over, yarn over, 1, 2, 3. E-wrap the next one, knit over, yarn over, 1, 2, 3. It's pretty simple. Just keep going. We're going to E-wrap 1, yarn over 3, all on the same peg. And then pause your video, and we'll come back and tell you how to take these off. So we're on our last one. I've just knitted over, and now I do my 3 yarn overs. 1, 2, 3. And now what we want to do is go on to row 4, which is purl the first stitch and take off all yarn overs for each individual peg, and then you move on. Now it's actually easier to pull the yarn overs off before you purl the stitch, so go ahead and pull these off. And they're going to stay here because they're locked in from the Ewraps before. And pull this yarn here, put the working strand underneath, and pull up, making a new loop just like in a regular purl stitch. Put that back on, and I've dropped it. Okay, put that back on and pull it snug, and then move on to the next one. You're going to pull these top 3 yarn overs off. You can do them all at the same time, or I find that I have to do them individually. And then purl that stitch. Now you're going to find that it's really loose the way this is back here. Just purl as much as you can, tug it, and then let these strands be long here for the yarn overs. And when we get down to making the whole row and the next couple rows, then I'll show you how to tug on this and make it work. But for now, you're going to have this big extra loop in the back, and you'll notice a whole bunch of loops later on here. So go ahead and pull these off. Once you get the first couple off, it just falls right out. Purl this, and you see how it becomes really big. This nice big loop here. It's because you've had these yarn overs on it before. So that's okay. Turn this around so you can see it. We're going to pull these 3 yarn overs off. Go ahead and purl this. And if it makes it easier, put your finger back here and tug on the yarn so that this loop doesn't get too big. Let's do that again. Pulling off the yarn over, and take your loop, put your finger at the back so it doesn't come off, and take the old loop off and put the new one on, and just leave these hanging out here. You're going to work your way all the way around the loom doing the same thing, and then pause your video right now and we will meet back up. As I'm going along here on the first row, I wanted to show you what this looks like when you pull it out. This is what the yarn overs end up looking like once you pull them out and then you purl. You can actually start gently, I'm looking on the inside of the loom, but you can gently pull on these to make them look longer. And I've already done this part of the loom down here. I've come around the second corner and back, and right now I'm about halfway on my last run here. And what I've done is I've pulled the yarn overs out, and I want to show you what these long loops look like. Now you can pull all of these out after you've done everything, or you can do what I've done right here and let them be long. And then just remember they're going to be really loose and fall off of your loom easy. And see how that loop was really easy to do, but these are going to be really large loops, and so if that confuses you, that too much stuff can be falling off, or if you got to put the project down, then you might want to wait to pull those yarn overs out like that, and I'll show you what I mean here in a second after I do this one. Okay, so now I'm on to my next one, and I haven't pre-lifted them off. Now, one little trick to get the yarn overs to lift off is you can hold your peg in place and grab the working strand from the back. Well, it was the working strand at one point. You can grab this yarn here and lift them all the way off and let them lay. And do a few at a time like this if you want. Pull that off and let them lay. And let's pull one more off and let it lay in the back. Okay, so these are laying back here. Now when you purl, it looks like the normal way to do it, except it's going to be really loose. So when you pull it off, you still have to be careful And I'm going to do a couple here to show you what I mean about pulling out the work. You could keep knitting along and doing all the rows and pull this out in the end, or you can do it as you go along. I kind of like to see what it looks like as I go. Okay, I've got that last one in. So I've got the 3 that I had pulled out before, and see how it's kind of loose? All you have to do is gently tug on it, and then it pulls out nice like the rest of these. You can see how this looks. So you're going to have this nice long drop stitch pattern all the way down your row, and just keep going and pause your video and we'll meet back up at the end of this row. Alright, we have finished this row, and I'm looking at the inside of my loom to show you what this whole row looks like with the first drop stitch pattern. And we're still on the first set, and by the set I mean that we're still in the first set, and when I say that I mean that we had our Ewrap and yarn overs, and then we had the purls and pulling off the yarn overs. Now we're going to finish up the set with another garter ridge stitch. So we're going to go all the way around the loom and do an Ewrap row. And after we're done with the Ewrap row, we will do a purl. And I'll come back after the Ewrap and remind you to do the purl. Okay, we finished our Ewrap row, and as you can see, the back of the scarf on the inside of the loom, it's now locked those into position. They're not going to be moving anymore. We're back onto the front side here on our starter peg, and we're going to purl. And if you notice, the Ewrap row was very easy to do, very quick. The purl is going to feel more like the normal stitch that you would do. It's not going to be so loose. So we're going to go around and do a purl row, and then we'll be done with our stitch pattern. Now I'll put the instructions up on the screen, but you're going to perform this pattern 2 more sets. So you'll have a series of 3 sets of these drop stitches. You'll find that these drop stitches really make the work grow, make your project grow quickly. And you could add however many series of sets that you'd like on your project. It doesn't have to be for this one. For this particular Spring Vine Infinity scarf that we're doing today, this one is going to have 3. I'll put the instructions on the screen for you, and so you can pause your video and we'll come back to finish this off. Wonderful, you have finished your last row of the set, which was the purl row, and I'm going to pause on this page right here and put up the directions for the sets that you're going to complete. Remember, you want to do 3 sets with the drop stitch pattern. You're going to do an Ewrap and yarn over 3 times, and then the next row you're going to take off the 3 yarn overs and purl the first stitch on the peg and go all the way around the loom doing that. Then you're going to do another Ewrap row and then a purl row, and then do that another time after. We only have 3 more rows left, and then we'll cast off together. Pause your video and we'll meet back up shortly. Thanks. Okay, we're back, and we have done the 3 sections, and on this last section you should have tied in your new strand from the new skein of yarn or hank of yarn that you have. And I'm excited. This is looking really pretty. I've got, this is my cast on edge, and then my first, second, and third section here. Now we're going to Ewrap a row. So we're going to Ewrap this next row, and again I will pause it and we'll come back and show you the next row. Okay, I'm finishing knitting over my Ewrapped row, and now our next row is going to be purl. So purl this entire row, and we will meet back up after. Okay, we're on our last row, and we're going to Ewrap this row. And when we come back, we will cast off together. Pause your video and meet back up. Okay, we finished our last row, and we are going to use the loose slip knot method to finish this off, to cast this off. This method was created by Jeannie Thompson Phillips, and she just calls it the loose bind off. And we are going to put our working strand in between the number 1 and number 2 peg, whichever direction you're going. I'm going to go to the right in this video, but I do have another video in a flat panel and I went to the left. So if you'd like to see that, that's great. It's in a very fuzzy yarn and I think you're going to be able to see it better in this video. So I'll be making another video with this by itself. Okay, let's get started. So we're going to put our working strand in between the number 1 and number 2 peg, wrap it like a knit stitch, and we're going to go underneath the bottom loop, which is already on the peg, and going to pull that working strand down through the loop and making a new loop. Now we're going to take this working loop and put our fingers through and grab the working strand and pull through. Okay, so now we've made a loop on here. What that does is that locks this peg in place, this stitch in place, and it's not going to go anywhere. We're going to do the same thing over here. We're going to go underneath the second peg, the loop here, and grab our working yarn out of the working loop, and then pull and make that a new loop here. So pull this taut, and so there, this is nice and snug. There's no gaps and spaces here. And so now we're going to open this loop up and pull through this working yarn. You haven't cut the working yarn, it's still attached to the ball or skein that you've got. Just keep going and pulling that a little snug. Alright, I probably pause the video here. My yarn that I'm working with has very thick edges and very thin edges, so mine's going to be a little bit harder to pull snug here. Yours might be a little smoother. But just make sure that this is nice and snug here. Not over tightened, but you get the idea. So now we're going to go underneath this next loop that's on the peg. Make sure and get the whole thing. Okay. And then grab your yarn. Like a knit stitch, you're going to pull down underneath that loop here, and then you're going to make a loop. Feed all that through, and then make a slip knot. Just basically all you're doing is pulling it through to make a nice slip knot. Now see how that one worked out better because I have a thinner yarn at that section. And then just move on down the loom. If you need to pull the slack back and make this loop smaller to be able to work with it, go right ahead. We're going to be doing the same thing on all the pegs as we go around. We're just going underneath the existing loop on the peg. We're not getting rid of it at all, and make sure you got everything on there. And then you get your working strand, pull it down, make a loop, make a slip knot, and go through. Turn your loom, and do it again. Grab that working strand, pull down and around. So I just have my yarn, this is attached to the ball over here, and it's actually just down on the floor, and you just keep going. And we're going to go all the way around until we do all 88 stitches that are on this. And I'm going to talk about alternates at the end here to tell you how you can take this and make some changes if you want, make it bigger, things like that. So if you don't have this loom or you want to make it larger, you are welcome to do that. We'll pause your video and do that, and we will be back. Okay, we're back, and we are on the last peg here. This one here is the last one, and I've already pulled through there, and now I'm going to do the slip knot through. Okay, and if you notice, we've got all this yarn in front of all the pegs here except for between the last peg and the first peg, and this is done in the round. Now, if you had decided you wanted to do this on a larger loom and you didn't want to connect it all, make it as a flat panel and knit back and forth, then this is where you would go ahead and make one more slip knot here and then cut and tie off. But since we're doing it in the round, I want to connect these two. See how this is empty here? So we are going to go ahead and do as we've done on all these other stitches. And just to mention, if you're watching this for the first time and haven't started knitting it, I had forgot to remind you that whenever you're doing that Ewrap row before, you should make sure that it's not too tight. So go ahead and make sure that that's not too tight. Okay, so we're going to do our other slip knot here. Okay, pull your slip knot through. Okay, and like I said, this yarn is just a lot bulkier. Want to pull one more through and cut this. And pull that out. And we'll end up weaving this tail in. And now that you are done, you're going to just pull this all off the loom. And it's now locked in, and you're not going to be able to have a problem on it. On this particular loom, these pegs actually come out, so you might find it easier just to go ahead and pull out your pegs. That's what I actually like to do. Then I don't have to worry about the removable pegs, and if I break anything, because you could have it on there pretty tight. So just pull those out, and you can see that nothing is coming loose. It's just a nice loose cast off here, and it's going to match your beginning end. So go ahead and pull that off the loom, and then we're going to weave in our tails and see the finished result. And here you have your Spring Vine Infinity scarf. Right now I'm showing it doubled over, but you can also let it hang. Right here it shows just a beautiful textural quality of all the different texture in this particular yarn choice. And to show this open weave better, you just take it and drop it down. Like that. And shows that beautiful stitch work, open weave here, like a nice vine, a nice spring vine. Choose your colors and have a lot of fun. Give it as a gift. But above all, have fun and happy looming. Thanks for joining me. Bye-bye.